Hi, I'm Kylie Saunders, the host of the Trybes That Thrive podcast series. Join me as I sit down with some special guests, of course, all interesting people, to discuss the top 5 priorities that impact HR and leadership, all with a bent on wellness. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please don't miss the show. There'll be lots of juicy bits in there for you. See you soon.
Hello, I'm Kylie, and I'm so excited to be here today with our Trybes That Thrive event and podcast series. And today we're podcasting with Tull Roseby, and I'm just so delighted to have you in the studio with me today, Tull.
Thank you for having me.
I know this is all a bit of a, feel frenzy in terms of like difference in terms of what we're doing today, but today we're talking about the top 5 priorities for HR leaders and business owners and leaders. And interestingly, the number one priority is around leader and manager effectiveness. And it's, number one because 60% of business owners are focused in this area. And I just find that absolutely fascinating. And particularly because, most would say that their leadership development and approach does not prepare their leaders for the future of work. Like there's been so many changes to the way that we've been approaching our work over the years, and particularly coming through COVID. So Tull, you have had quite an amazing background, a decade in the care and health sector and,
Correct.
In business prior to that. But just an intro, tell me a bit about you and the businesses that you run today.
Yep. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate
It's a pleasure.
I've been in the healthcare industry only for about just over a decade. So I started in a business in the in-home care space where we look after people in their own homes. And following from that, started a business called Daily Care, which is a technology platform that unifies the whole care ecosystem. It's a complex business, but it's a good one.
And really fascinating in terms of the work that you're going to achieve in that environment. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tull. It's been no secret that the health and aged care sector has been through a lot of change over the last few years and has really been the backbone of our economy through COVID in terms of being thrown into a global pandemic and, caring for patients in an environment that no one had any clue about, but also with ageing populations and being able to deal with the transition, I suppose, to in-home care and not, overpopulating our hospitals over time. Like there's been a lot of change and evolution in this sector, hasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, COVID really highlighted it. I think it was always there.
Yes.
But it's really put a microscope on it, and I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. How's the team fared over this time? Like what have you observed in terms of, I guess, on-the-job performance, but also how your leaders and managers have fared during this pretty challenging time that we've been in?
I'm going to answer that in maybe a different way, if that's okay.
Of
And I think I think through my journey as a founder of a business, where you had one employee, which is yourself, and you're doing everything from cold calls to marketing to account management to collecting dollars, whatever it is.
Yes.
And then eventually you have to employ somebody, and then you employ a second person and a third person and a fourth person, and then all of a sudden you've got an enterprise or you've got a business where you actually have to start to lead.
Yes.
And that's a mind shift and a transition that I think all founders have to go through. And then you have to inspire people, and you have to have a clear vision and a roadmap. And I didn't necessarily know how to do that.
I know it is. Business evolves, and yeah, you're right. There's like lots of different things that come at us on a day-to-day perspective, and we have to pivot and adjust our expectations in terms of delivering the services that we first set out to do.
Absolutely.
And then obviously the team that is doing that work is greatly impacted along the way. So when you got to a place of actually bringing leaders into the business, what did you identify as being the number one thing that you had to focus on?
Again, it's really about inspiration, having a clear vision of where you're going as an organisation. I've been really lucky and fortunate, I think, in the way that I've had a great team around.
You really have
around me, and hopefully I'm able to support them in everything that they want to do in life as well.
Yes.
I didn't get it right all of the time, but in the main, I did. And I think one of the things that I really needed to do, again, as somebody coming from a person that just had that it was themselves, is that you needed to learn how to trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've been doing things all by yourself for a really long time, so trust was really key. That was the first thing that I had to learn.
And in terms of, I guess in-home care, there's been, a lot of progression in this space over the last few years. What support do you have to be able to provide people that effectively are remote workforces? They're going into other people's homes. They don't have a single location to show up in every day. They don't have people on the ground or, those support networks around them because their environment literally changes, every time they go into a different person's home. So what sort of support mechanisms have you had to, bring in to be able to allow those people to be successful and safe?
Yeah. And safe is an interesting word, right? Because safe is not just physically safe, it's emotionally safe, it's mentally safe.
Yes.
And you're right, the environment changes all the time for them. So I think, and safe also to ask questions, when they're when they're not feeling in a comfortable position. To be able to call on the company, to be able to have a buddy system,
yes,
which is really important, particularly when you've got a whole range of different services that you're offering as an organisation.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously those leaders that are in your business, you've got to be able to look after them as the fatigue sets in with, the intensity of work and, people, potentially being in circumstances that aren't favourable. Yeah, they're dealing with individuals that might have dementia or, physical disabilities that, are very challenging environments. So how have you been able to support your people in business with some of that, Tull?
It's been an interesting process, I think, as a business, and as you grow as well. When you've got 10 caregivers and support workers, or you've got 400 or 1,000, it changes along the journey, right? And how you're able to support those people, because at the end of the day, from their perspective, they want to be heard, they want to be listened to, and from the customer side of things as well. I mean, they want to feel like they're the only customer you've got.
Yes.
So being able to really wrap your arms around them,
yes,
when in a time of need, but also through the onboarding process,
yes,
through the induction process, through the training process, all of it.
And I know you've done some pretty unique things or in pilot phases around, some of the training that you offer your people as well. And what's kind of been the feedback around that, or some of the observations you've made so far with some of that training and being able to support individuals with that?
It's been really exciting actually for us. It's been sort of on the roadmap for a really long period of time. And I think from because we see it at a grassroots level, we can see where the gaps are.
Yes.
From maybe, shall I call it, traditional training.
Yes.
And it's not just about the skills of how to use a hoist or how to do wound management. It's also about the soft skills, the so-called soft skills. But it's so important.
Yes.
How do you engage with somebody?
Yes.
When you're entering into their home.
Yes.
The other part around it, which is really interesting as well, is that we have a lot of new Australians coming into the sector. It's needed, and when you're training somebody from a different country with a different culture, with a different way of learning, you've got to really adapt to it, and doing it in the Australian way or the old way,
the traditional way.
It's it needs to change.
Yes. And what has been some of the feedback from your supervisors or managers on the ground with approaching some of that differently? Like, what sort of feedback do they now get?
Well, we've just started,
Yes.
but with some of the very early feedback is that it's absolutely 100% necessary.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that I know that we talked about prior to this podcast is around virtual training
Yes.
versus face-to-face training.
Absolutely.
And I think because of COVID, we swung, I think from the care sector anyway, swung too far one way in terms of doing it virtually. I just don't think you can with human to human contact, being able to be guided and educated on how to do something properly. I don't think you can do it virtually. Maybe in follow-ups,
yes.
but certainly not when you're learning something brand new.
And there has to be a hybrid approach to some of that,
100%,
doesn't there?
100%.
And being able to bring people into a real life circumstance or scenario rather than just a textbook and, virtual environment that is potentially not what it feels like or is when they're actually in that real life environment.
We can all read instructions and manuals, but unless we're taught how to do it properly,
exactly,
particularly when you're talking about human beings.
Exactly. And retention of our people and our managers is also key. What have you seen that is, I guess, some of the things that you've had to put in place to actually retain your supervisors and leaders in the business, in both businesses actually, Tull, because they're very different businesses, even though they're in a similar environment. What have you seen there?
I think really some of the work that we've been doing together, I think has been unbelievable. I think leadership coaching and wrapping your arms around the leaders of the organisation. I've seen it. When you remove fear,
yes,
and you build trust,
yes,
magic can happen. It's phenomenal.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth. I feel like I'm saying that.
Well, it's I've seen it firsthand, and when you do that, and you've and people are working together with that one vision, and they truly, deeply, believe in where the company's going, and you remove judgment, and you create, a safe environment, as we mentioned before. Watch out, because the business will move fast.
It does move incredibly fast, doesn't it? And actually, this is a really interesting point, because buy-in to the overall, I guess, business plan or strategy is quite key to that as well, because, who would have thought we would have gone into a pandemic? Like, that was just, a minute, we blink and our whole world changed. And when you're in a fast-growing environment with a lot of pressure, from a leadership perspective, they have to have buy-in along the journey, don't they?
Yeah,
so,
100%.
And you're right, that magic can happen. But is there something that you've done to be? I mean, I know you're a very open and transparent leader yourself, and people come on the journey with you as part of that. But has that been by design from you, Tull, or have you learned that along the way, or what are you doing that you think special?
Well, I mean, I think that I'm a work in progress, right? So
we all are.
Yeah. So
our greatest work in progress is ourselves.
So I think that you've always got to be able to stretch yourself, and being able to, as the business evolves, and I think as a whole leadership team, you have to evolve as you bring more people on, as you grow as an organisation, as you hopefully become more popular as an organisation.
Yes.
You have to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess in terms of, the next steps and, looking at your organisational structures and what that means from a development perspective, what do you prioritise in terms of growing your own or, finding that talent externally? Like, how do you approach that in your businesses?
I ring you.
Of course, right? Well, yeah, that's part of it.
No, really. I mean, I think that being able to put that structure in place early,
yes,
and thinking about having a I always say, you have a microscope in one hand but a telescope in the other, and you've got to constantly do that and check in and make sure that you've that next phase, that next part of the business plan, the next 12 to 24 months is really well planned out from a HR perspective, from a leadership perspective, from a core values perspective.
Yeah,
I think that's it's key,
and also probably lowering the risk for individuals as well. There's a lot of compliance in your sector.
Yep.
And I think that can be scary, when you're really trying to attract talent in, as to what the obligations are on those individuals and what that can mean for them. So have you got any insights around how you sort of manage that, or
attracting?
Yeah.
I always like to do things slightly differently to maybe the status quo. And I do that deliberately, and I do it on purpose. So hopefully that's those are the type of things that you can do as an organisation to attract the best talent.
Yeah.
And again, of course, we've heard it for years, and a lot of people are talking about culture, but it's so important.
Yes.
The one, if I could say, the one thing that I've learned over my journey is really, how do you really cement an incredible culture?
Yes.
And we've all had jobs with bad bosses and good bosses and great mentors, and you learn what you really like, and then but simultaneously you learn what you don't want.
That's
as
right.
well, and I think that's equally as important.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely drives, I think, productivity for the individuals, but also job satisfaction and what they ultimately go home with at the end of each day as a result of their contribution, which is really, really important.
Well, I think that everybody's got the daily grind in their lives, right?
Of course.
So if the idea was to always try and build a culture in a business where people could go through the doors of the office and feel like, yes, I've got this, and I really want to make this the best day I possibly can.
Yes.
If we sort of succeed in that, then I think we're doing okay.
Tull, that is something that I feel when I come into your business. I see the integrity in the individuals, the experience in the individuals, the passion of being in the care industry, but equally a very high level of trust and engagement to do their job well. They have they operate in their own areas of specialisation and functionality, and they just have this sense of purpose, which I think is a challenge for a lot of businesses. Is there something that where does that come from? I know that's hard to put your finger on, but is that being deliberate around the type of individuals that you've brought into the business that now lead the organisation in those particular remits, or is that something else that you're doing?
Great question. So I think that initially, probably in the first few years of the businesses, I probably had a thought that I wanted to bring people in from different sectors that weren't necessarily ingrained in this is the way we do things. So, I think that was a positive step forward.
Yes. So it's perspective that's allowing that to happen, different perspectives?
Yeah, yes, 100%. And you're getting different perspectives from different industries coming into a new one.
Yes.
But I also think that the other part to all of this is, being able to have, and because they've got those different perspectives, is also to have a safe space where they can, learn and fail and then progress even further, from those learnings.
We call them flurnings.
Flurnings?
There's never a fail. And it is. We do. We do learn from some of the mistakes that we've made, but I think business needs to allow people to make those mistakes so that they can actually progress to the next, the next best thing, which is amazing. And I'm also fascinated that I know you're an entrepreneur and you seize the moment and the opportunity, but I am fascinated with what you're doing around the care ecosystem and technology platform that you're bringing to life that is going to totally revolutionise the way we interact in this space. And that's all I'm going to say, because I know that this is your gig, right? But where do you see technology leading us in terms of the way that we interact and lead people in the future?
I don't know how to answer that necessarily. I mean, I think that the technology is without question, as we all know. I mean, it plays a massive part in any business.
Yes.
Who would have thought, pre-COVID that we would all be doing, virtual appointments with our GP.
I know.
Right. So, and now it's normal. Everybody feels comfortable with it. So,
yes.
To answer your question, I don't know. Are we going to have robots caring for us? I don't know. Not in the next 10 years, but
okay.
But we just really don't know where it's going at this particular point.
Yeah.
I still think that human to human connection is really, really, really critical.
I am so glad you said that. So AI is not going to take over the world.
Well, I don't know about the world, but maybe not the care space just yet.
And Tull, in closing, if there's one last thing that you wanted to leave with, whoever's listening to our podcast today, from a leadership perspective, what's been your biggest learning?
I think it's really about, and it's been said before, I think you've got to employ and get the best people around you possible.
Yeah.
And support them, get out of their way, right, to do
definitely
what they are really great at. And make sure that, from a personal perspective, their cup gets filled.
Yeah.
I think that, do they absolutely love what they do?
Yes.
Do they believe deeply in what the vision of the business is?
Yes.
And as I said before, do they feel safe?
Yeah.
That's the for us anyway. I think that's the way we try and lead our people.
Our industry in the recruitment and HR outsourcing and consulting world is actually a care industry, and I am so privileged to get the opportunity to work with your businesses, Tull, in the care sector. And I love the work that you're doing. I love the people you've got in your business, and equally, I just wish you all the success, because I know under your leadership, the business is just going to go from strength to strength. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe and follow our socials to stay up to date. See you next time.